Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Discovery Garden webinar series. This month, we are featuring the Islandora Solr Views module. When properly configured on your site, the Islandora Solr Views module can make exploring your digital content more intuitive and visually appealing by exposing Solr search results through Drupal views. Everyone's favorite developer, Dan Aiken, returns this month to lead another exciting discussion. As you are all aware, Dan is very well known in the Islandora community, having been involved in many projects in many capacities, and is a big part of what we do here at Discovery Garden. As always, as you've just heard, I will be recording this webinar, and I'll send out a link to access it later on today. Your mics are going to be muted again for the duration of the session, and when we reach the question portion, please type your inquiry in the chat window, and either Dan or I will read it out loud. So as most of you know by now, my name is Adam Smith, and I'm the Business Development Associate here at Discovery Garden. I've been with the company since 2015, and I've had a chance to speak with a lot of you along the way. And as always, for those that I haven't met, I look forward to doing so in the near future. So for the webinar today, we're going to start with an overview of how Islandora and Discovery Garden fit into this picture. After that, I'll introduce our guest speaker, as I mentioned, Dan Aiken, who's going to lead us through the discussion on the Islandora Solr Views module. So as I mentioned, following Dan's presentation, I'll open the floor to any questions, and just feel free to type them in the chat window along the way. So with that, let's begin. So as I mentioned, let's start by talking a little bit about Islandora for anyone who might be new to the community. So the Islandora open source technology stack consists of three core components, being Drupal, Apache Solr, and Fedora Comments. The stack also includes a lot of utility components and dependencies as well. Islandora is a very large open source software stack, and it includes many applications. In essence, the developers of Islandora and the community that supports it are experts at integrating third-party tools into Islandora. So let's talk a little bit about the core components individually, and we'll start with Drupal. Many of you are familiar with Drupal, as it is a leading open source content management system with over 30,000 user-contributed modules from almost 100,000 active community members or developers. Now, active community members are vital to any open source project, and the same can be said for Drupal. People are invested in Drupal, and that leads to ongoing development and success. So Drupal serves as the presentation layer in Islandora. It's how we create a website and how we expose it to the internet. We also use Drupal for collaboration. It has a great framework for users, roles, and permissions. We use that workflow for activities, and it really does integrate in with a lot of other functionality within Islandora. So Islandora, in essence, is a suite of Drupal modules that allow us to build repositories on top of Fedora Comments. Now, these modules make it possible to build, populate, and configure a digital repository without the aid of a developer. So next is Apache Solr. Now, Apache Solr is used for discovery within Islandora. Solr is very powerful, flexible, and configurable. It's used on some of the most heavily trafficked websites and applications worldwide. Key features include full text search, search faceting and filtering. It's highly scalable and fault tolerant, and provides near real-time indexing. So for example, if we ingest an object into Islandora, it's going to be indexed within Solr almost immediately, and it's going to become searchable within 30 seconds. So the final core component is Fedora Comments. Now this is the layer that stores and preserves all of our digital content in Islandora. Fedora Comments is purpose-built for data preservation and long-term data accessibility. Some key features include auditing and fixity checks, RDF XML support. We're able to scale Fedora Comments to millions of objects. It has support for virtually any file type. And it's built for interoperability. That means you can export or migrate your data in a format so that it can be stored elsewhere should you choose. So as I mentioned, those three core components make up the open source technology framework. We like to call it a framework because it really is the integration of components working together. Organizations all over the world are using the Islandora framework to build their repositories. Now, some of these instances are customized in order to meet specific needs, and some are not customized, as the software is very usable out of the box. People are scaling these repositories into the millions of objects, and they continue to have these large repositories perform very well. So a little bit about Discovery Garden. Discovery Garden is a service provider of Islandora. Now, we work to remove barriers to using the open source technology. We launched in 2010, and we were a partner in the Islandora Foundation, which is the nonprofit entity that fosters the code. So since we've launched, we've contributed to over 90% of the Islandora code base, which we've written here at Discovery Garden on behalf of our many customers. We offer a lot of services that relate to an Islandora repository, and I'm going to send a complete list of our services, which can be found on our website later on in a follow-up email. So as I mentioned, it's my pleasure to once again introduce Dan Aiken. Dan is a developer here at Discovery Garden and has many years of experience related to all things Islandora. Dan has led many of these webinars and many presentations to various groups all over the world. So once again, welcome back, Dan.
Hello. Grab this laptop. There we go. Okay, so what is views? We're going to talk about a few things here. The very first thing we're going to talk about here is what precisely is views, because views is something that's owned by the Drupal community, or it's owned by parts of the Drupal community. It is a core Drupal module. I say that meaning not specifically that it's owned by the by Drupal itself, but that it is such an integral part of Drupal that where you see a Drupal site, you tend to see views. And in fact, it has become such an integral part of Drupal that it has been adopted into Drupal 8 proper. So someday when we manage to migrate ourselves over there, we'll hopefully get even more robust usage out of it, but we get pretty good usage out of it now. What does it do? Well, the old, we'll say the old school way of making web pages was to make a web page. You open up a text editor, you write out a file, and you have yourself a web page, .html. The sort of newer way is to generate pages on the fly, which is what software like Drupal does. Content management software is designed to allow you to create pages through definitions that sort of generate HTML on the fly so that everybody can look at it and it looks all nice. Views is a way of going one level deeper than that and dynamically generating content types based on results that you get back from a query of some kind. Typically with core views, it's going to be a query to the Drupal database, but views is extensible and it's possible to allow it to pull information from all sorts of different sources. So what did the Islandora community do? Well, we created, next slide, Islandora Solr Views, which simply put adds Islandora Solr Search as a potential source for building views. So rather than from another source like the Drupal database, you can pull things directly out of Solr out of your search engine. So whereas generally Solr is used for searching and for metadata display, Islandora Solr Views allows Solr to be used sort of similarly to a database, where you have all this information in Solr about all of your objects inside Islandora, and you're using that to generate Drupal content as opposed to anything else. So what can you do with it? Well, there's a few different things you can do with it. Islandora Solr Views supports the creation of pages and blocks. It supports the use of Solr fields for display, for search, and for sorting. And it does that in sort of a defaultable fashion. Most of the things that you establish inside Islandora Solr Views are defaults that you're presenting to the user, sort of a curated search, you might say. It's also able to do a little bit more complex things, like using the context of the current page's object and using identifiers of objects that are found to perform some operations. And actually, when we get into demo time, we're going to demo some of this, and it's going to be kind of neat, I hope. Perhaps just as importantly, what can't you do with it? Well, you're going to be able to perform Solr queries with it, but then you can't really perform queries on the things that you find. So you're only really going one Solr query level deep. So anything that you need to do with it, you're going to need to be able to do with a single set of Solr query filters. You can't really get properties of the currently displayed object unless you specifically include that object in your set of results. If you don't, and usually you don't, then you're not going to be able to display any information. So it's not usually used for things like metadata display, because that's kind of a weird use case to be using with it. Perhaps most importantly, it doesn't use controls provided by the Solr search block. So if you're trying to modify a query or do faceting or stuff like that, that's not really what this is for. This is for curated sets of search results that you display sort of on a page. Let's jump into the meat of this. Let's get into demo time. There's 4 things that I want to demo here. And I'm going to jump, thank you. I'm going to jump out of, can I just click exit? Whoa, oh, there we go. Okay, let me close that. So we're back in, I believe I'm still
you are
sharing the screen. Okay, cool. I am going to go to a demo site that I have here. I'm going to look at my laptop because I forget what I called it. Okay, so I have a site set up. .local. This is a bare bones Islandora site. This is, if you were to install stock Islandora on a stock Drupal installation, on stock Fedora, on stock everything, this is pretty much what you get. I am going to log in with an administrator account at discoverygarden.ca. This password is Islandora. And it shows it was docs, but who really cares? This is an administrator account who has permission to create views. That is slightly important here. You do need permission. You do need to specifically give roles permission to be able to create views, and that gives them access to be able to create these blocks and pages with the Islandora Solr search results. I am going to, we're over in structure here, which is the section where we create things using a particular type of entity that Drupal understands, one of them being views. We have a whole bunch of views that are in here already, but none of them are really what we want. So I'm going to add a new one. And it's going to ask us for a little bit of information. I'm going to call it thing. That's what I call everything. Under here, it's a little bit unintuitive. It tries to be intuitive. It's trying to say, show something of the type something, tagged with something, sorted by something. This is where we select where we actually want to be using views instead of Drupal content, or rather Islandora Solr search results instead of Drupal content, which is down here. We're going to show Islandora Solr, sorted by, unsorted, doesn't really matter. We're going to create a page. You'll also notice we have the option to create a block. I'm not going to do that right now. We're just going to create a page. We have a couple of options. The page has a title, of course. The page has a path, which we can edit later, but this is where people are going to be able to access it if they go to your site. If you want to provide a link to your view, this is where it's going to go. I'm actually not going to create a page. I'm going to create a block, because we're going to be doing some interesting things with this block, and I'd like to have it as a block later for when we're messing around with this. For those who don't know, what do I mean when I say block? Everything inside Drupal is organized by blocks. There are sections of your page where things go, and blocks are little chunks of site that can be moved around to different parts of the page. Or not moved anywhere at all, or moved into a particular place dependent on what the path of the page is or who has permission to view it. You can think of them as little chunks of a page, and we'll show you exactly what that means a little bit later. But first I'm going to create one. Create a block. It's got a title. It's got 5 things per page, and I'm going to continue and edit this. So we're going to see exactly how this works. You'll notice up there at the top in nice big yellow warning letters, says that all changes are stored temporarily. Click Save to make your changes permanent. That is very important if you're messing around with things. This is a temporary page, and nothing really gets saved here until you click the big old Save button. One thing I'll show right off the top is down here at the bottom, we have the auto preview, which allows us to take a look at what's going to wind up in this block once we're finished messing around with it. It has a title of whatever we put in there as a title. And currently there are 5, just the word score is in there. So what this means is that currently in this auto preview, Islandora Solr Views has found at least 5 search results. Possibly more, but it's found at least 5, and it's displaying to us whatever information we told it to display. By default, the only thing that it displays is the score, which is what Solr rated this particular thing as part of the search results. What score is the default sort in most cases. Something that scores higher in search results will end up first up at the top of search results. Something that scores lower will be down at the bottom. It's commonly not used in Islandora because we tend to put more stock into search results that are based on things that are more meaningful to a particular repository. But score is there. It's always there. It's sort of the default thingy. I'm actually going to get rid of it because I mean, there's nothing there. Before I do that, let's mess around. Actually, I'll mess around with the base settings in a bit. First, I'll show you exactly how setting this up works. You'll see we have a whole bunch of different settings here, but the 3 ones that are most important to us that we want to take a look at here are fields, filter criteria, and sort criteria. And everything else is kind of just gravy. It's stuff to make it look nice or perform more to the way that you expect. The most important things are the fields, the filter criteria, and the sort criteria. And they are pretty much what they say on the tin, but I will explain them. Fields are the things that you want to show up for each result. So I want to display the title of something. I put the title field in my list of fields. I want to display a description of something. I put the description field in my list of fields. Then we have filter criteria. Filter criteria are what you use to filter down your set of search results. So without any filter criteria, your view is going to display every single item in your repository, you know, with a pager. So 5 at a time, but everything. So if you don't want to display everything in your thing, we need some sort of filter criteria. And then possibly optional, possibly not, we want some sort of a sort criteria, which is exactly what it sounds like. We don't want to sort them by the default, which is the score. So maybe we want to sort them alphabetically by title. Maybe we want to sort them by topic. Who knows? Put in a sort criteria. I'll start with these fields, and actually I want to remove this Islandora Solr score one. There's a couple of ways to do that. One is you can click on it and remove it, but I wanted to show you quickly there's a rearrange option here as well that allows you to remove it and move things around, and we'll actually probably have to do this in a second because we're going to be messing around with some weird things here that's going to require us to rearrange things. It's yelling at us right now because we don't have any fields defined. Thank you, Views. That's very helpful. I will be adding fields so you can stop complaining. So let's do something really, really basic here. Let's say I want to get a set of search results and I want to show the title of the thing and I want to show a little description of the thing. So what do we have here? We have a list of fields I think for like it's going to depend on your particular Islandora installation, and specifically your own installation of Solr and your own installation of gsearch, what all these fields are called. But by default, with the like DGI has a very robust set of field transformations that take Islandora objects and turn them into Solr fields, and they sort of have a set they sort of have a set makeup. There's some things that you can expect about them. For example, one of the things that you can expect is that for actual properties of a specific object, like the label or the owner or the created date, those are going to be listed under the FGS subheading, FGS underscore some other stuff. So you have created date, label, last modified date, owner ID, state, a few different things. These are the base object properties that I have. You'll also notice there's a few different copies of them. I won't get into specifically why those are there in this seminar, because that's more of a basic Solr thing, but just know that there are different fields created based on the same information, because we need to store things as different types. So you'll see like the created date has a version of it that's an actual date, but it also has like a text version that you can use for display. The label has a couple of different versions. One of them is tokenized, which means it's useful for search, but then we have other ones that are string versions, which are more useful for display. Sometime if we want, if we ever go over basic Solr settings, this is one of those interesting topics, is what types of Solr fields are available to you and when do you use them and why do you have them? But for this particular seminar, because we don't have time, we'll assume that knowledge is in place. So I want to display the label of this thing. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to display the label. And I also said I wanted a description. So let's go with the simplest possible one, Dublin core description. Yeah, this one. There we go. So I'm going to add both of these to our block. And so now, rather than, before I mess around with these, I'm going to just apply this, and it's going to look sort of goofy, but that's okay. Now, instead of displaying a score for these things, I have a label and potentially a description. You'll notice, though, that it looks really ridiculous and sort of maybe not too useful. So let's mess around with some things. For one thing, why is our label on the bottom? That's not where I want that. I would like my label to come first. So I'm going to rearrange these, and I'm going to stick the label up there. We'll apply that. And can you actually get applied? That would be super of you. Did I actually drag that up there properly? Or is it telling me that it's not going to do it because the weights are... All right, views, if that's how you want to do things, that's fine. Okay, we'll manually change the weight just for you, views. A higher weight means that a thing is heavier and sinks to the bottom of the list. A lower weight means that something is lighter and floats up to the top of the list. It's a weird way of doing things, but that appears to be how Views wants to play with me right now, so we'll go along with it. What about these stupid labels, like FGS label MS? What does that mean? You show that to a user, they have no idea what's going on, they get frustrated. Let's give it a different label. Let's click on this thing, let's mess around with it a little bit. For one thing, we want to create a label. We don't want to use the regular label that's there. We want to call it help. And how about, to make things really convenient for the user, how about clicking on the title actually links them to the object itself? That's a nice little checkbox that we added in there to allow people to actually go to an item from the set of search results. You can turn something to a link. I'll apply that. So now this looks a little bit better. We have a title label instead of that weird FGS label MS. And we have an actual link to the object. If I click on this, I'm going to command click this, put in a new tab, and it's linked us to this particular object. So now we have a sort of a functioning set of search results, except that I want to mess around with this DC description a little bit. I am going to call it description instead of DC.description. And you'll notice that most of the things that I have in that list don't have a description. So maybe I don't want to display a description if none exists, which is something that's available to me in the no results behavior, which is very aptly named. I can hide that if it's empty. So if it comes back with nothing, I can just say, okay, well, I don't want to actually display a description field. Let's leave that out of there. Apply this. And so now I have one of these has a description, the other ones don't, so that field doesn't get displayed. I'm still displaying every single item in the entire repository, though, which I find to be a little bit of a problem. So maybe I want to filter that down. So I kind of got to say, okay, what is this block supposed to do for me? Well, let's come up with something. Maybe this block is supposed to be a list of all of the top-level collections in the repository. How am I going to do that? Well, I'm going to make a filter that says, filter it down to only anything that is a member of the top-level collection in this repository. Top-level collection happens to be called Islandora root. It might be called something else for other repositories, but I know for this particular one, it's called Islandora root. So let's add in a filter that says, okay, only show me something if it's a member of the Islandora root collection. Add a filter. And it's going to take a second to spin up because I have a million Solr fields. Again, the name of this field is going to vary depending on a particular repository's implementation of gsearch and the gsearch configurations, but the default gsearch configurations that DGI has created stick all of the object relationships under the rels x underscore and then whatever the name of the relationship is. So the relationship between an object and its parent is called it's actually rels underscore x. There we go. Is member of collection. URI MS. So this in particular is the one that I want for, because I'm looking for an actual proper, the full collection URI. And I'll apply that. So we now have a filter that's looking for the URI of the member collection. Notice I can do a couple of things here. I can expose this to visitors, allowing them to change it, although messing around with URIs, exposing that to visitors might be a little advanced. In this particular case, we are specifically making a block that has a specific purpose. So I'm going to say we're not exposing this to visitors. I'm just going to type it in, and it's going to be what it is. Specifically, when we're talking about the URI of a particular object or collection, we have to start it with the info::Fedora portion of that URI, because that is a part of the URI. And then after that comes the PID, Islandora::root rot. There we go, much better. So this is a filter that says, okay, well, we want all the objects, we want the title and description of all the objects in the repository, but only if they have an is-member of collection relationship with the root collection. Anything else is not going to show up in our fancy little block. Let me apply that. And now our block has reconfigured itself so that it only shows members of the top-level collection, like the large image collection, the transform collection. And I just realized that none of those have descriptions. So that's not going to show up, but that's fine. We know what that's all about. I'm going to save this because I'm starting to get a little spooked. I have a little bit of paranoia about saving things. Before we go on to the last thing that we're going to do in this basic page, which is add some sort criteria. Let's say that I want to sort things by the label. Well, that's fine. I have, it even says here, I have a more sortable string version of the label, FGS label SS. I'm going to sort by that. Apply that. And do I want to sort ascending or descending? Ascending. That seems to make the most sense for alphabetical order. Apply that. There we go. Now I have an alphabetical listing of all the collections in the top level collection in our repository. You'll notice a problem, though, is that we only have 5 of them listed here, even though I know for a fact that we have way more collections at the top level here. So how do I fix that? Well, that's where we get around to our second bullet point in demo time, which is we're going to play around with some of the base views settings and see what more we can get out of here. The first thing I'm going to play with is the pager. By default, the pager displays a specified number of items, whatever number you provide it, which is, again, by default, it's 5. I'm going to say that instead of that, we give a paged output with a full pager. Apply that. And we will take the default as fine. So now we have, this is sort of the default looking pager that you may have seen are kicking around Drupal. Instead of displaying only 5 items and nothing more, we can go to the next page and see some more collections, or go to the next page and see the rest of them. Go back to the first page. You know, it works like a pager. Does what you expect. That's sort of a piece of built-in functionality that you can just do with views, and it works perfectly fine with Islandora Solr Views, so you can get a big old set of search results. Let's try one other thing that I wanted to show you here is under the format section. So like right now we're displaying this as an unformatted list, which is what this looks like. It looks really boring, I would say. There's not too much exciting about this unformatted list. But we have all sorts of different ways to display things here. We have chart display and grid display, responsive grid and a table. I'm going to do it maybe as, we'll try the grid display. Let me show you what that looks like. You'll also notice, pretty neat here, we have the ability to group by fields. We don't have any fields that we'd really like to group by here, but this is one further way of sorting your sorting items in your search results. So currently they're sorted alphabetically by label, but potentially if we had another field in there, something like a subject or topic or geographical location or something like a genre or something that you would expect to be able to sort on or group things on, I could potentially add that to my list of fields so that I'd have the label, the description, and possibly the genre. And then in here I could say, okay, well, let's group things by genre. And so they would be sorted alphabetically inside their little groups, but they would be grouped by genre. Each of those, each genre that was found would be turned into its own little group with its own little set of search results inside. I'm not going to do that right now. We're just going to apply this, and there's our fancy grid view. You can see it looks like the grid view for collection view, except we don't have the fancy thumbnails in there. Although that is a great segue, because the third bullet point I have here in demo time is, what if I want those thumbnails in there? This looks all right, like it is, but let's do something more complex. Let's add some thumbnails in there. How do we do that? And this is where things get a tiny bit esoteric, but bear with me and we'll power through this. So we need to know some information first off about these particular objects, the audio collection, the basic image collection, what have you. Specifically, we need to know the Fedora PID. The Fedora PIDs we can use to tell us all sorts of different things. So we're going to have to add it in here as a field. I'm going to go add, and the field that we're going to add is the PID. This one. Okay. Now, that PID, by default, you'll see it's going to show up in my list of search results, but I don't really want that PID to show up there in the list of search results. And so what I can do is exclude it from display. That way, Solr Views has the information about the PID, but it doesn't actually show us the PID. Why do we want the information about the PID? I will tell you in a second. Right after, excuse me, right after I rearrange these and drag the PID up to the top here. Why am I dragging the PID up to the top here? I will also tell you in a second, right after I apply this new ordering. I didn't actually manage to get that. Oops. Excuse me. I don't want to hit add. I want to hit rearrange because I want to rearrange these things. I want to get that PID all the way up to the top, please. Let's give me these weights again. I would like you to be number 1, and I'd like you to be number 2. Yeah, like, good gracious, Views, why are you doing this to me today? This isn't like you. Yeah, I didn't even really do it. You know what? That's okay. We'll we can still do what we're trying to do here. So, what is the thumbnail? This is a little bit of an esoteric question, but the thumbnail is actually just a data stream that exists at a place on a particular object and is something that we can access at a URL. I'm going to show you how this works. Let's go over to the audio collection. I'll open this up quickly in a new tab over here. So here we have an audio collection, and if I go to manage this particular collection, it has a whole bunch of information about it. It's got a couple of audio objects in it. It's defined, its behavior is defined by the collection content model, and it's got a big old list of data streams. These are all files that exist in Fedora somewhere that contain information about the object, whether it be like XML information or some sort of information like the thumbnail of it. We can see the thumbnail here. That's what the thumbnail image looks like. It just looks like a folder. And whenever we go to view this collection somewhere else, we see that thumbnail image in the list of items in that collection. This thumbnail is actually accessible via a URL. If I click on it, you'll notice here that the URL up at the top here says qidem vsphere icelandlace.local /Islandora/object/ the PID of the collection /datastream/tn/view. That is a sort of dynamically generated URL that gives me access to the thumbnail. Notice there's a couple of things in here that are specific to this particular collection and this particular data stream. But if I swap those out, like if I deleted that and replaced it with, let's say, BC and viewed that, now I'm viewing the Dublin core data stream of the object. If I swapped this out with the root collection, now I'm viewing the Dublin core record of the root collection. We use these URLs like we use them here, Islandora/object/PID/datastream/ID/view, as a way to directly access data streams. When you go to view a data stream, what you're actually viewing is the information passed back from this path. We can use this to our advantage in Solr Views. Check this neat thing out. I am going to add a new field here. And I'm just going to look something up quick. Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. Okay. What I'm going to do, you notice there's a few global items in here. Custom text, contextual links, color box trigger. Actually, I'm going to filter them down. That's global. There we go. I'm going to put some custom text in there, and we're going to see what happens in a second. Let me add a custom text field. Views, when you get information about a particular field, that information is available to you for subsequent fields. So you remember before when we got the PID of each object? That PID is now available to us to use in other fields. Actually, you'll notice in our list of replacement patterns here, we have a few different things available to us in a replacement pattern. We have the description, the PID, and label, because all of those are above this in the list of fields. We can do some neat things with this. You'll see here it says you may include HTML. Well, you know what that means. We may include an image by creating an image tag like this. If you know your HTML, this is the HTML for sticking an image in a page somewhere. We create an image and we give it a source, is something, and that something that we're going to give it is the path to the thumbnail. Islandora slash Islandora slash object slash data stream slash thumbnail slash view. That is the path to the thumbnail for each of these objects that we have in our set of search results. And it's going to grab the thumbnail from each individual object and put that inside the image tag. I'm going to not create a label for this because it doesn't really need a label, it's just an image. I'm going to apply this, and now we have thumbnails there. They're all the same thumbnail because all of the collections, or all of the objects in the top level collection, all of the objects in the top level collection have the same thumbnail. But there is the thumbnails. We put a little image link in there, and we linked the image to the path to the thumbnail itself. And so we were able to grab the thumbnail from each of those objects and stick it in there as a, stick it in there as a thumbnail for our little block here. It'll do the same thing for each of the pages. Load those thumbnails. Again, they're all going to be the folder image. However, I'll quickly save this while we have it. I am going to remove this filter criteria here, where we only show members of the root collection. I'm just going to remove that. And now we have all sorts of things. We have our 1922 Charlottetown Guardian. We have our baby lobster. We have our Charlottetown bus schedule. I got some weird objects in here. But yeah, we have all our thumbnails being displayed here. Yeah, we have all our thumbnails being displayed here all over the set of results. This is, I mean, there are all sorts of different sizes of thumbnails here, but it is possible to, using block CSS and things like that, to get them all to be the same size and organized the same way. What else can we do with context of the object itself? Well, currently we have the context of each object that we have in our search results to grab a thumbnail. But what about the context of the page that we're on right now? That's also something that's available to us. And as a matter of fact, if I click the advanced section here and drop that down, you'll notice there is a spot here that says Contextual Filters. So we were able to create contextual fields based on a search result, but we can also create contextual filters based on where we are in our Drupal site right now. I'm going to add one of these. So what kind of contextual filter might be important for us? Well, there's pretty much one kind of contextual filter that's going to be important for us right now, and that is the contextual filter of the object that we are currently looking at. We can do all sorts of neat things based on the object that we're currently looking at. In order to add that, the type of filter I'm going to add here is the global null filter. I'm going to apply that. And the global null filter gives us all sorts of different options, but specifically, the one that I'm going to use here in order to get the PID of the object that we're currently looking at is provide a default value. And that type of value is a raw value from the URL. And the path component that we're going to take that raw value from is the third path component. You'll notice that for every single, I'm going to go back to our collection view here. So that for every single object you look at in the repository, the PID of the object is always the third spot in that path. So we have Islandora is the first spot, object is the second spot, and then this big PID, Islandora audio collection, is the third spot. So we can grab that for our contextual filters. That's what we have here. We're providing a default value. We're grabbing the raw value from the URL at the third spot. The raw value from the URL at the third spot is always going to be the object PID when you're on an object page. So by grabbing a contextual filter that grabs the third position from the URL, what we're really doing is grabbing the PID of the page that we're currently on so that we can use it later on. I am going to apply this. And we now have a contextual filter that we can use in different places to do all sorts of neat stuff for us. Specifically, what I'm going to do with this is I would like to set up a couple of filters. So we're going to say that we're going to set up a filter that asks whether or not the object that I'm currently looking at is a collection as opposed to anything else. I'm going to add a filter criteria here, and it's going to think really hard for me for a second and then give me a list of fields. What we usually call the field with the DGI configurations, what we typically call the field for asking whether or not an object has a particular type is rels _x _has model _URI_ms. So that's what the field that asks what content model a particular type looks like. I'm going to apply that, and then it's going to ask us, okay, but it's equal to what? Well, it's equal to info Fedora /Islandora collection C model. That's the URI of the content model collection. So you set up one filter that asks whether the current thing is a content model or a collection. The second thing that I'm going to add in here is a second filter criteria that asks whether or not something is a member of the current collection. So I'm going to stick in here rels x is member of collection. This is the one that we used before. Ask whether something was part of the collection. And rather than giving it a specific PID, we have We have replacement operators that we can use for these things. We got a replacement operator from our global null that we can use in all sorts of different things. Like you'll notice it shows up here in our list of replacement patterns. We have %1 and !1, which is our title and it says global null input, but really it's the PID that we just got. We can use that as a replacement pattern for all sorts of different things. I could use that in a filter criteria, or I could display that in our list of fields. I can do a few different things with that, but that's basically what we're doing here is we're going to filter by information about the current object, which would be info Fedora / !1 was that filter criteria or that replacement pattern that we had that describes the current PID. We can use that to, rather than specify a specific PID, we specify the PID of the current collection. Apply that. So what's going to happen here is we have a filter, and it's actually not going to show anything right now, although we might be able to get a contextual filter with Islandora object. Okay. Not sure if this is going to work, but I'll give it a shot. See if it updates. I didn't think that was going to work. But if we were in the context of an object on an actual page, what we could do is if we were on the root collection, what it would be doing is it would be saying, okay, is the root collection a collection? That's what this first filter criteria is for. The answer to that is yes, it's a collection. So good, great. The second thing it asks is the object that I'm looking at a member of this particular collection, which I've stuck in there with that !1. So it's asking, am I looking at a collection? And am I looking at something that's a member of the current collection? What would happen here is, for example, if I were to look at this block on the top level collection, it would show me all the collections that are children of it. If I were to look at it somewhere else, let's say if I were to go to a collection, like if I had an audio collection and I had some audio files on the top level, but I also had some collections smattered in there, I would be able to have a block that shows me all the sub-collections of this particular collection that I'm in right now. And what collections it would show to me would change depending on where I was. If I went to one collection, it'd be one thing. If I went to another collection, it would be another thing. It may be nothing if the collection has no children. It's entirely dependent on how I set up my list of filters. I can also use this in, I'm going to remove this quickly. I can also use this in my list of fields. So like, let's say I want to create a link to the parent, or link back to the current collection. F equals, this is, you know, from your basic HTML, this is how you make a link, Islandora /object / !1. And you would have %1 is the label of it that we can use for display. So what this would do is it would create a link for each of those search results that would link you back to the top level collection. For these use cases, I'm not entirely sure what you would use them for, but these are here for examples to say, like, if I want the context of a particular object, the thing that I'm looking at, let's use that to create a list of items from search results. That's, I think, I mean, let me very, very quickly, I would say we're getting very close to the end of time here. but I would say we should open it up to questions right now. But before we do that, I'll quickly show you. I'm going to save this, and I'll show you where you would go to put this on a page. It's under Structure and then Blocks. And when you create a view that is a block, it will show up in your list of blocks. You'll notice it showed up under our list of blocks under the View category as test thing. Currently, it's nowhere, but we could put it in our content section. We'll save that. And excuse me. Secondly, it is possible for me to configure this so that rather than showing up on every single page in the repository, I could say that it only shows up on Islandora/object/star. That way, it doesn't show up everywhere in the repository. It only shows up on object pages. So if I went back to, for example, the audio collection, and I viewed that, I don't think I saved that properly. Maybe. Only the object, or I shouldn't have / there, or should I? Yeah. Let me quickly. I actually saved. Let me save this. There we go. It's being a little mean to me right now, but ideally it would show up on. Oh, this site's being so mean to me right now. It won't let me reorder things, and it won't let me put views in the content section. But regardless, this is where you'd go to put in a particular place if you were to put it on a page in your repository. The content section is the section that's right here, and then you have things like sidebars, and it depends on what theme you're using, but there's all sorts of different ones that you can use. Anyway, I'm going to cut myself off there and hand it back to Adam.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that, Dan. As I mentioned at the start of the call, we're going to crack open the chat window and see if there's any questions in there. If you have any questions, just type them in.
Views is pretty strange and powerful stuff, to be honest. It's a way to turn Solr into page generation, which means it's extremely powerful, and there's a great deal that you can play around with it to make it do interesting stuff. So if you are curious about would this be used to customize browse, search, and object display? The base Islandora search, it wouldn't be used to customize that. It could absolutely be used to customize browsing. So the standard way of browsing your repository is to go through the collection display, but you could shut that entire thing down. Like you could block access to the top level collection and instead funnel people through views instead. And so rather than having collection displays that are set up that look like folders, you curate sets of collections based on search results instead. So you say, I have a collection made up of everything of this particular content type, or I have a collection made of everything that fits this particular category. You use and you create views for each one of those, and rather than sending people to your giant tree list of collections, you send them over to your list of views instead, so they can browse and interact with your site that way.
All right, thank you for the question, Chris. While we're waiting for some more questions, if there are any, I just want to talk a little bit about an event that's happening next week at the Code for Lib conference in LA. So if you're heading down there, we're putting on a session. The session is titled Islandora in the Wild, Training and Resources from Pilot and Production Repository Projects. The workshop will cover topics such as single-site and consortial repositories, metadata wrangling, content modeling advancements, batch ingesting content, and discovery and harvesting. All examples will be taken from both pilot and production repositories. Participants will leave with an understanding of the Islandora software framework and community, the underpinnings of Islandora content modeling and metadata requirements, the ability to batch ingest content, and the knowledge of how to expose repository content to search engines and aggregators for discovery and reuse. So you can visit that link at the Code for Live website for more information. But if you're going to be down there, like I said, it's starting next week. The event is on Monday. Check it out. There's one more question here.
Yeah, in terms of the last question, if it's possible to create smaller thumbnail icons. Yeah, I didn't really mess around with thumbnail icon size, and it's just because I was trying to throw them in there as fast as possible, and all the thumbnails on my site are of crazy disparate sizes. But it's pretty it's pretty simple to just add in some custom CSS and say, okay, well, the width and height of this particular thing are 100 pixels, and scale those down to there. That's what's done for the collection view, and I just didn't do it because I was lazy. As for examples of it being used in the wild, we'll have to get some of those.
Yeah.
Off the top of my head, I can't remember the last time we implemented it, but it would be really nice to get a list of it. I'm like, there is a name that I am trying to pull out of the front of my forehead right now, and it's driving me insane. But there is the most recent site we did it for. They completely eschewed the concept of Fedora collection objects, and instead on their front page you can potentially browse the entire repository, but you're intended to browse particular categories and content types. And so they have like 10 or 12 different views. One of them's for like this particular content type, one of them's for that particular content type, one of them is for pieces of music of this genre, or PDFs of documents that fall into this particular genre.
We'll get that information. We'll send in the link in the follow-up package after this.
That'll be really good.
Awesome. Okay, so thank you for the questions. That brings us to the end of the time for today. Thank you to everybody for joining, and as always, thanks to Dan for leading it. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me at any point in any regard. I will be following up after with some information, and you can look forward to receiving our next newsletter in March, which will give information on our next webinar. So with that, it's time to sign off. So thank you to everybody, and goodbye.